What's up guys, Asian here again with another build video, and today we're going over the Stamina Templar DPS. So Stamina Templar pretty much has remained more or less the same between Harrowstorm and Greymoor. Not a lot of changes in terms of sets, and not a lot of changes in terms of rotation either. Your rotation is still really going to be centered around making the most casts of jabs as you possibly can. Rotation still remains quite simple, and it still remains one of the higher hitting stamina DPS in the game right now. You'll be even moving into Greymoor here. So in my opinion, the Stamina Templar is actually probably going to be the best stamina spec for people to get into if you're just starting to learn how to do stamina DPS, because of its fairly simple rotation, it's fairly easy to obtain sets, and the fact that it is still quite important to have in a raid group because of that Power of the Light, Minor Fracture, Minor Breach uptime. Now, like the rest of our build videos, we will not be going over any sort of gear. Gear is reserved for the Stamina DPS gear video, which should be popping up in the upper right hand corner right about now. So if you're interested in knowing what sort of gear you should be running, go ahead and check out that video and then come back here. This video will be going over the skills and the rotation. Starting off with our front bar here. We only really have 3 abilities that you absolutely need to have, and they are Biting Jabs, Power of the Light, and Barbed Trap. These next 2 abilities that I have here, Camouflage Hunter and Ring of Preservation, they are both mainly here for 3% additional weapon damage that you get from the Fighter's Guild passive. Now, they both have their uses. So for example, Camouflage Hunter can be used to get more consistent Minor Berserk uptime, and then Ring of Preservation can be used as a heal, as well as a source of minor protection as well. So give you a little bit more survivability, as well as a fairly decent heal overall. So both of these abilities still have their uses. But if you want to replace these abilities with other abilities that you might want to run, so for example, let's say you want to run Vigor instead for a stronger self-heal, then you can, by all means, go ahead and replace one of these 2 abilities with Vigor if you so desire. Again, the primary purpose of these 2 abilities is mainly for the 3% additional passive weapon damage that we're getting. Next, we have Flawless Dawnbreaker, which is one potential ultimate that you could run as a Stamina Templar, the other one being Ballista on the back bar. If you're not going to be using this as your main damage ultimate, I would still recommend holding onto it as a front bar ultimate, because it does provide 3% additional weapon damage, again, through the Fighter's Guild passive. Then on our back bar, this is the Bow bar. Very similarly, we have 2 abilities that we must have on our back bar, and a third one that we must also have, but it's a little bit of a flex spot because it doesn't have to be this one ability. The 2 abilities that you should have on your back bar are going to be Endless Hail and Ritual of Retribution. The other 3 abilities here are mostly for their passive uses, so Camouflage Hunter again, Barbed Trap again for the 3% additional weapon damage. Then you have Blazing Spear. This is mainly for the Piercing Spear passive, so we're able to maintain additional crit damage while we're on our back bar. You're not actually going to be using it all too often. Then we have Ballista here as a damage ultimate. Now, if you want to run something like Restoring Focus on the back bar instead, which is a very popular thing to do for people who need additional sustain, you'd basically be replacing Blazing Spear here, and instead of running Ballista as your ultimate, you would replace that with Empowered Sweeps, and either run that as an ultimate, or preferably run Flawless Dawnbreaker as your ultimate instead. So this is one potential setup here. The key thing here is to make sure you always have one Aedric Spear ability somewhere here on the back bar to maintain the additional crit damage you're getting from Piercing Spear. So again, this is the one that I tend to use, which is the Ballista back bar here as our primary damage ultimate. But that pretty much covers it for all of the skills that you're going to want to run as a Stamina Templar DPS. Now let's go ahead and go over the rotation. So like I mentioned, rotation is very, very simple here. We only really need to focus in on really just 5 abilities. So your back bar here, Endless Hail and Ritual of Retribution, they line up fairly decently well. Now, Endless Hail has a 14-second duration or a 12-second duration with a 2-second windup, but Ritual of Retribution has a 12-second duration in total. So you can pretty much combine these 2 together whenever you're on your back bar. So your back bar rotation's really, really easy. It's just Endless Hail, Ritual of Retribution, then you bar swap to your front bar. And if you have Ballista up, then you would be running Ballista, obviously. Your front bar rotation is also relatively simple as well. You just need to maintain Power of the Light, so you need to let it run the full duration. If you don't let it run the full duration, you won't get the copy damage, so make sure to have it run the full 6 seconds before you renew it. and then Barb Trap every 18 seconds. So this is going to be a little bit more dynamic than your back bar rotation, because back bar is just 2 abilities back to back. But here on the front bar, you got to keep an eye on Power Light and Barb Trap, and then the rest of the time, you're just going to be hitting jabs the whole time. Your rotation, as for an example, is going to look something like this. So I always recommend trying to start off, if you're running Restoring Focus, start off with that, and then start off with Barb Trap. And you see Power Light runs out, so we put that down. You can see here, it's fairly simple. You're going to be basically more or less trying to optimize the amount of jabs you can make. So you're not going to want to recast abilities super often. Basically, you're going to want to recast them the minimum amount of time that you need to. And that's pretty much the whole rotation right there. Again, it's fairly simple, fairly straightforward. Back bar is very, very easy. Then your front bars, again, just keeping an eye on Power Light and Barb Trap and using them whenever they are off cooldown. Now remember that Power Light, it needs to run completely out. You need it to run the full 6 seconds duration in order to get the reflected damage. And then Barb Trap has a 1.5 second arm time, so you do need to cast it a little bit early. Don't cast it right when it runs out, because then you're going to have a little bit of downtime on Minor Force. Was hitting the trial dummy with Ritual, so we do need to reset the dummy here. Now, before we do our dummy parse, I will point out that for this parse, I am running Deadly Strikes. Deadly Strike is a Cyrodiil set that comes from, I believe, Lestarius, if you want to try your hand at buying the set pieces and RNG farming the pieces with AP points, but you can also buy this off of Guild Traders because it is an Overland Cyrodiil set. So Deadly Strike is one of the reasons why I think Stamina Templars are one of the easier Stamina DPS to get into, because Deadly Strike, you can buy it off of Guild Traders, which leaves just your body set. Here we're running Relequen, obviously, but you don't have to start off with Relequen. You can start with stuff like Hunting's Rage or Mechanical Acuity instead, and then your Monster Helm set's going to be Selene's, which is a pretty easy set to obtain. Selene's Web is a little bit on the easier side when it comes to the base game dungeons. So overall, I do think that Stamina Templars, because you can run Deadly Strike and be almost as effective as Lokkestiiz, you do have an easier time getting started, so to speak. Now, Lokkestiiz will be stronger if you're able to maintain higher than about 80 to 85% uptime on the Major Slayer from Lokkestiiz, but Deadly Strike comes very, very close. So this parse is with Deadly Strike here. Just kind of make sure you guys know what's going on here. Let's go ahead and do our 20-minute dummy parse. So I do want to reiterate here that the dummy parses are not necessarily indicative of trial parses. The dummy is missing a couple of buffs and debuffs. So for example, we're missing Zens, we're missing Martial Knowledge, we're missing Minor Courage, for example. We're also missing a couple of sustained options too. So for example, we're missing Zipnea Blades, we're missing Sentinel Rokugams, all of which would be there in an actual raid environment if you are running with an organized group. Now we are running Lava Foot to kind of imitate in-raid sustain, but even with that, in-raid sustain is going to be a little bit higher compared to just running Lava Foot. So let's go ahead and get started with this parse. We'll point out here that you don't want to be too slow on your biting jabs. The delay is actually a little bit slower than the actual global cooldown. So if you pay really close attention to the sounds of the jabs as they're hitting your target, as soon as you hear that fourth hit, that's when you're going to want to cast your jabs again. Or rather, I should say, that's when you want to use your light attacks and cast into jabs. Well, if you listen really closely to the sound effects, you'll notice that you can hear the sound of my light attack hitting pretty much almost immediately after that 4th jab hit, and that's kind of the timing that you want to try to hit here. And maximize the number of jabs you can get. If you're waiting for the animation to run completely out, then you're going to end up undercasting jabs. Now with the change that they made to the Maelstrom Bow, so the last couple of ticks are all about the same strength, you can actually recast Maelstrom and this hail a little bit early. You'll see that I am doing that here in order to maintain better uptime on Ritual Retribution. But again, you should always make sure you're letting Power of the Light run completely out, otherwise you're not going to be able to get that reflected damage. Now do be careful with jabs, because jabs is considered a channel ability. You won't be able to drink potions or anything really while you're in the channeled animation here. You'll basically be stuck in the channel, and anything that you decide to do will be queued and used at the end of the animation. That does include things like synergies and drinking potions. So you have to time your potion hit and to happen when you're outside of that biting jabs animation. You can queue up a synergy though, so if you hit a synergy while you're in the animation, it'll just use the synergy as soon as you're done with the animation. So there you go, that is the Stamina Templar DPS parse here, and this is with Ballista. If you're running Dawnbreaker, you see similar DPS. Hold just under 86k, and as you guys saw, it's actually quite a simple rotation. I would still recommend picking up something like Action Duration Reminder or Surrender just to keep an eye on your Power of the Light proc as well as your Barbed Trap proc. But overall, it's a very, very easy rotation, and you pull fairly good DPS here. So again, just shy of 86k. You can pretty much round it up to 86k if you wanted to, with a pretty simple, I don't want to call it a single button rotation, but it's as close to a single button rotation as you can possibly get in ESO here. So a couple of things you're going to want to keep track of to make sure you're making the most out of Power of the Light here. You want to make sure that both of these hits have the same amount of hits. So you can see here I actually didn't get 2 explosions because I probably cast it a little bit early. So you can see that the bigger hit here is the explosion, the lower hit is the initial hit here. So I at 36, 34, so I missed 2 explosions here. That could increase your DPS a little bit higher, so I just got to be a little bit more mindful of that there. So again, make sure to have Power of the Light run completely out. At the end of a parse, these 2 values, these 2 number of hits should be exactly the same, or at the very least just one different depending on how your parse ends and things like that. So that pretty much covers it for this build video. If you guys have any questions at all, feel free to leave them down in the comment section below. I'll try to answer them all to the best of my ability. Hope you guys enjoyed, and I'll see you guys in the next dungeon.